everybody, my name is Mars. You can call me Mayor MG if you would like, and I'm gonna be honest with you, this is like the third or fourth time that I have filmed this video. I tried to film it yesterday, and I was just having literally every issue you could have with filming a video. For one bit, the camera, quality recording was so low for no reason. Another time, it just didn't have the audio, and there were things going on outside that was messing with everything. I was just not having a great time. Eventually, I did end up with a sound video in terms of the actual quality of it, but I was so annoyed by everything at that point that when I watched the footage back, I'm like, this is terrible. No one's gonna want to watch me in this video because I just have such a bad attitude about it, because I was just done at that point. But it's the next day. I'm going to redo this, even though I'm very happy with the books that I had picked out. I really want to read them. We're gonna hope that I can get them onto this new TBR, because we're just starting from scratch. So, before we get to the TBR portion of this video, we're gonna talk about all of the books that I read in June. So the first book that I read was The Sorcerer of the North by John Flanagan. This is the 5th book in the Ranger's Apprentice series. I'm reading one book a month for this year, and I loved it. This is my favorite series ever, and this book, as well as book 6, which I will be reading in July, whether it ends up on this TBR or not, make up a little arc in themselves, and it's probably my favorite arc in the entire series, so I'm just having a grand time. Then I picked up volume 1 of Monster, a manga by Naoki Urasawa, and I was originally planning on reading the entire series, but it was so dark and dense, and not in a bad way. I felt it was very fitting for the story. It's a very, gruesome story. It's gothic horror, and I had a great time. I gave this a 7 out of 10, but I could not convince myself to read the whole thing in one go. I feel like I would have been stuck on it for probably the entire month. So I'm like, you know what? I'll read the first volume and we'll get to the rest in the coming months, maybe. I'll probably read 1 or 2 volumes at a time. But I did really enjoy it. Then I picked up The Dark Hills Divide by Patrick Carman. This is a dark children's series, the first book in it, and I gave this a 6 out of 10. It just wasn't what I was expecting. It was kind of disjointed plot-wise. It felt more like things were just happening rather than the characters coming to logical conclusions on what to do next. And I really loved the world, but other than that, I didn't have a great time. Next up, we have a book that I did have a great time reading, and that was All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue, and I gave this a 9 out of 10. Honestly, the only reason it didn't get a 10 out of 10 is because I feel like there were a few too many pop culture references. That's not really my favorite thing to see in books. I feel like it gets kind of annoying, and so there were maybe a handful too many, but I still really, really love this book. This was the book my members over on Ko-fi picked for their members-only vlog for the month. If you didn't know, I have memberships, and one of the perks is that you get to vote on one book from my TBR each month to get an exclusive vlog of me reading, and this is what my members had picked for June, and I just had a fantastic time. Then I read the first book in the Animorphs series by K.A. Applegate. It's called The Invasion, and I actually enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. It was super short. I read it over the course of 2 hours, and it was a little bit annoying at first with the way it was written, because it's very stream of conscious first person perspective, but from an annoying teenage kid. I think he's 13, and it was kind of weird, but the story itself is very intriguing, and I just found myself so compelled, and I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series, and I can't wait to see what happens in the other 53 books. After that, I picked up Tiny Shivers by the one and only Laura Nettles. If you didn't know, Laura is a YouTuber here, and she's a very good friend of mine. This is a collection of horror stories. There's some short stories, some flash fiction, some micro pieces. To be honest, I don't really know the difference between all of those terms, but those are all the terms that she uses, so it's fine. This got a 10 out of 10 for me. It's fantastic. Laura is just a master at her craft, and on top of that, there's these really cool illustrations in the book that I just think add to the atmosphere. This one's my favorite one. It's a a seance going on. This was just so good. So if you're a fan of horror and you like short stories and stuff like that, definitely pick this up. Then I read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, and I actually listened to the audiobook at the same time that I read this physically, which I did also do for All Our Hidden Gifts. I don't think I mentioned that, but I listened to the audiobook while reading physically, and that was a great move for both books. I had such a fantastic time doing that. I think it really got me into the books. For this one especially, because there's a lot going on in this book, and I at times had trouble keeping things straight, but hearing someone read it aloud to me as I was following on the page helped keep me in the story, so I wasn't like flipping back and forth trying to figure out what was going on. I kind of just went along with it until I figured it out, if that makes sense. And I gave this an 8 out of 10. The ending wasn't my favorite, like it was fine, but I just kind of wished it ended with something a little bit more, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't because I'm not giving any details because I don't want to spoil this for anybody. But yeah, I didn't love the ending, but I still had a great time reading this. And the last thing that I want to talk to you about in this section of the video is Mob Psycho 100 by the mangaka One, the creator of One Punch Man, if you've heard of that, same guy. And I'm actually still currently reading this, so there are 16 volumes total, and I believe I'm on like 14. I'm reading digitally because I only own the first 5 physically, but this is the manga that my favorite anime is based on, and so obviously I'm having a great time because I love the anime, and there's a couple of changes that I've noticed, nothing major, just tiny little details, and I'm still having a great time because those tiny little details don't really change so much of the story that I wouldn't like the manga. But yes, I still have a few days left, and I'm planning on finishing this today, so with the last couple days of the month I might read something else, but I'm really not sure. Probably not. I might just pick up a book on my July TBR. And so with all of that out of the way, it is time to pick my books for July, so let's get into it. So the first step in picking out my TBR is finding out how many books are going to be on it. So I've got my D4 here and my little tray that I'm going to roll it in. I'm kind of hoping for a low number because I've got this readathon happening the end of the month. So I mentioned my memberships before. The highest tier is the Martian Council, and one of the perks for that tier is a mini readathon each quarter inspired by my game, my TBR game, and so that will be running the last 2 weeks of July. So I'm hoping I get a low number for this TBR so that I don't have any obligation reads that I have to try and squeeze into that, because that would just be so much work. So we're gonna put this down here. We're gonna roll this up, and what did I get? Okay, so I got a 2, which means I have to re-roll and add. Oh boy, let's see. And I got, for this one, I don't know if you can see that, a 3. So 5 total, which is like the exact middle because the lowest number I can get is a 3 and the highest is 7 with the way I do my rolls. So more than I was hoping for, but not bad. I think 5 is doable. So I've got my deck here, and we're gonna split it a little bit just so that I make it clear I'm not cheating. So we've got my cards. We're gonna pull 5. The first one is the Cleric. Cool. I like the Cleric. The Cleric is the class that I play most often in D&D, and I like the prompts that I have for this card, so we're off to a good start. Next we have the Rogue. Okay. Don't remember the prompts for this one. I don't remember the prompts for most cards, if I'm being honest. Number 3, the Monk. We're getting all class cards. Number 4 is the Construct. Ooh. And the last card for July is, if I can grab just one, the Two of Adversaries. So I'm going to look at my little cheat sheet of all of the prompts and find books for them, and I'll get back to you. Okay, it was actually a lot harder to pick out these books than I expected it to be, but I'm very happy with the books that I've chosen to fit these prompts. So the first card that I pulled was the Cleric, and the prompt options for this card are either the last book in a series or an author that I've read from before, and I've gone with an author that I've read from before, and I will be reading An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I'll be reading it as an ebook. I don't have it physically to hold up for you. I read Vespertine a couple of months ago and really enjoyed it. and her other books, Enchantment of Ravens and Sorcery of Thorns, both sounded so interesting. I did take a while to decide between the two, but ultimately I will be reading An Enchantment of Ravens. Then I pulled the Rogue, and the options for this card are either a book that's out of my comfort zone or a genre that I don't usually reach for, and I've gone for a genre I don't usually reach for, the genre being like a crime, mystery, thriller sort of deal, and the book is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I got this at a free little library a few months ago, and I'm just so intrigued to read it. I really like Richard Osman, like, as a celebrity. I think he's a really funny guy, and so I'm excited to get into this. Then I pulled The Monk, and the options for this card are a book that's part of a duology or a book where I don't own the rest of the series, and I've gone for a book where I don't own the rest of the series, because let's face it, most of the series I have I only own one or two books from. But the one that I've gone with is The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. This is a YA fantasy, and I think I got it at the dollar store, and I don't really know anything about it. It's quite chunky, but being YA, I'm hoping it'll be fast paced. But something about this kind of just called out to me as I saw it on my shelf. I was just looking over all my books, and I'm like, that's the one. The next card I picked was The Construct, and the prompt for this is a book published before the year 2000, and so I have another ebook for this one, not something I can hold up for you, but I will be reading The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. It's a classic, and I'm a little bit ashamed of myself that I haven't read it sooner, because I kind of have wanted to read this for a while. And then the last card that I pulled was the Two of Adversaries, and the prompt for this one is a book that's intimidating because of age or language, and for me that means a classic or maybe a translated book, and I've gone for a translated book because it does intimidate me, partially for that reason. That book being The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. I actually got this at a free little library the same time I got the Thursday Murder Club. So, pretty interesting. This book is very intimidating. It's kind of thick, and I've heard so many great things about it that I really want to read it, but I'm very intimidated, hence why it fits this prompt. But also, I can't wait to crack into this. So we have these three books plus An Enchantment of Ravens and The Bell Jar for my July TBR. I'm very excited to read all of these, and it doesn't feel like so much that I won't be able to finish before my readathon at the end of the month, so I'm very happy about that. I didn't get my Rage's Apprentice for the month onto this TBR, but it's very short, it's like 250 pages or something, so I should be able to read that no problem. But that is the end of this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel for more content, and that way I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.